on your team, that person has to have these core areas of expertise. So now we're in the deal, and it's moving along, and we don't have time to go through everything in a deal. We originally wanted to do a mock negotiation. We unfortunately don't have time for that. But what we can do is talk about the key areas that a founder will be dealing with personally in an M&A deal. And we can even, negotiate about some of them. But those are, for the purpose of this, and I also have to pause for both of our firms' sake and say this is not, what we're about to say in the context of this video is not legal advice. You cannot watch this video and be prepared for an M&A deal. You have an insight, and I think this will help you, but this video is made with the expectation you will retain counsel. And as I said in my prior video, you should also have other experts on your team involved too, your accountant and your wealth manager, so that you really can be prepared. But anyway, the three topics we want to talk about are the following. One, deal consideration. And that is simply the money you're getting from your own ownership in your company through this M&A deal. Second, the non-compete. You will be required to sign a non-compete, most likely, in most deals. And we're going to talk about how that's possible, given many people know in California you can't normally have a non-compete, but you can here. Third, we're going to talk about what happens when this founder has to join the acquiring company and the documents that will be signed in that context, usually an employment agreement or an offer letter. There are other things in deals too, but this, for the sake of simplicity, we decided to choose these three and dive deeper into them. So going to the first one, taking them in order, deal consideration. Tell us what you typically see in terms of how's the founder making so much money in these deals?
We hope that they are.
We hope that they are.
Because we're rooting for the founders.
Right.
So there are a couple...
Or executives.
Or executives. Right. There are a couple of different ways that value gets to executives in an M&A deal, aside from the employment piece, which I think you want to talk about later. So one way is through their ownership interest in the stock of the company. And sometimes you will see an acquirer say, I'm going to pay X amount for the company itself, and that gets divided among the owners of the company according to their ownership of stock. And sometimes you'll see them say, and we have a retention plan that's basically compensation, right? And it could be either equity in the buyer or even just cash that's set aside. And that doesn't go according to stock ownership. That's kind of rifle shot to individual contributors based on perceived importance and length of retention.
Got it. And do you ever see in deals where it's just the company counsel negotiating against the acquiring counsel, where an issue of like allocation of additional money is put into place from deal consideration, or is it just set based on the ownership of the company?
It's not just set based on the ownership of the company. It is sometimes a negotiation. There are a couple of different layers to that. Like even distribution of proceeds that are intended for the stockholders of the company, sometimes that gets tinkered with on the eve of a sale. But this is again a classic example of where a founder's lawyer is important. When we have a discussion again where it's total amount of the deal consideration is X, Y goes to the ownership of the cap table, Z goes to these individual contributors, and there's some negotiation internally about the separation of Y and Z, how much is on which side of that. That's a classic example of where my job is to get the deal done, not to help referee who's getting that money.
Right.
And that's where we need somebody to come in and say, I'm here to speak for the founders of the executive team.
Yeah, and oftentimes, and again, the people I'm representing are called key employees. And that's a term of art. That means that there are specific people working for the company that the acquiring company has identified in the term sheet for people that have to come as part of the deal. Right. As a condition of the deal. And those are the most important people that the acquirer wants to have. They're usually the CEO, the CFO, the chief product officer, the chief marketing officer sometimes.
Almost always the technical folks.
Always the technical folks, because they're really valuable. The lawyers, not so often. So the GC, usually not, because the acquiring company probably has one of those. So that person might get, depending on his or her arrangement with the company, might just have their equity accelerated, or they might leave, or who knows. But I'm usually not representing execs that are not key employees.